In our little neighborhood, we were the couple everyone envied. People saw Sarah and me as the epitome of a successful marriage. I can't count the number of times someone stopped me at a barbecue or a block party to say, "You and Sarah are just perfect together." It was a phrase I had grown used to hearing, and I'd smile and agree, proud of the life we'd built. 2 kids, a golden retriever, a beautiful home on a tree-lined street. It all painted the perfect picture. But perfection is a tricky thing. The more people believe in it, the harder it is to admit that it's all an illusion. It wasn't that our marriage was a disaster. Far from it. We still laughed together sometimes, shared inside jokes, and went through the motions of a happy couple. But there was a distance that had crept in over the years, like a shadow neither of us wanted to acknowledge. It was in the way she avoided eye contact during dinner, or how she clutched her phone like a lifeline, always tilting it away when I walked into the room. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was just busy, stressed, tired from work and the kids. And I had my own distractions, burying myself in long hours at the office and late-night emails. But every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of something in her eyes, something that made my stomach twist. It was at a neighborhood barbecue one Saturday that I first felt the full weight of that shadow. Sarah was the center of attention, as usual, laughing and chatting with the wives while I stood by the grill with the guys. She looked radiant, her laughter echoing across the yard as if she didn't have a care in the world. "You're a lucky man," one of the husbands said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Sarah's a keeper." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, she is." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. It wasn't just her distant behavior lately. It was the way she carried herself, the way her laughter seemed a little too bright, a little too forced, like she was playing a part. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone beside me. "You were the life of the party today," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced at me, her smile faint. "Just trying to have a good time," she said, turning back to her phone. I wanted to say more, to tell her that I missed the way we used to talk, the way we used to share everything. But the words caught in my throat, and I stayed silent. The next morning, I went to the car to grab my work laptop, which I'd left in the back seat the night before. As I reached for the laptop, my hand brushed against something under the driver's seat. Curious, I pulled it out, a small black phone I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at it. It wasn't her phone, the sleek, rose gold one she carried everywhere. This was something else, something hidden. For a moment, I considered putting it back, pretending I hadn't seen it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I powered it on. The lock screen was blank, with no identifying features, but there was no passcode. The messages were the first thing I opened, and what I saw made my stomach churn. Short, cryptic text from an unknown number. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. Let me know when he's out so I can come over." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This couldn't be what it looked like. There had to be some explanation, some logical reason for these messages. But deep down, I knew. I turned the phone off and shoved it back under the seat, my hands trembling. My world, the perfect world we'd built, suddenly felt like it was cracking at the edges, and I was terrified of what I'd find if I looked too closely. The burner phone stayed hidden under the car seat for 2 days. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again, like it was some cursed object that would ruin everything if I gave it too much attention. But that didn't stop it from gnawing at me, its presence like a splinter lodged deep under my skin. Sarah didn't seem any different during those 2 days. She still went about her routines, laughing with the kids, texting on her regular phone, and chatting with me about the little things. What we needed from the grocery store, which teacher to meet with for our daughter's conference. It all seemed so normal, which only made it worse. I couldn't stop thinking about those texts. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." Who had sent them? And what exactly had been so incredible? Every time the thought crossed my mind, it felt like a punch to the gut. On the 3rd day, I finally gave in. Sarah was out running errands, and the kids were at school. I went out to the car, my hands already clammy, and retrieved the phone. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at it for a long moment before powering it on again. The messages were still there, taunting me. I scrolled through the conversation, trying to piece together a picture from the fragments of text. Same time next week? Of course. I'll make the excuse. You always do. Can't believe he doesn't suspect anything. My throat tightened. The words were so casual, so confident. They spoke to a history I didn't want to imagine, a pattern I hadn't noticed. I checked the call logs next. The same number appeared again and again, often late at night or during the hours I was at work. There were no saved photos or videos on the phone, but the absence of them felt intentional, like someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. But the thing that really got me, the thing that made my hands shake and my vision blur, was a calendar entry. It was for the following Friday, marked simply as yoga class. Yoga, the excuse she'd been using every Friday evening for months. I sat back in the chair, the air feeling suddenly too thick to breathe. She wasn't going to yoga. She wasn't meeting up with friends or running errands or doing any of the things she told me. She was meeting someone else. I slammed the phone down on the table, the sound echoing in the empty kitchen. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Who was this person? And why didn't I see it sooner? I tried to think back to the last few months, searching for signs I might have missed. The times she'd come home late, flushed and breathless, claiming her class had run over. The way she always seemed to have a new outfit for her workouts. The sudden surge of energy and confidence that I'd chalked up to her newfound dedication to fitness. I thought about the times I'd kissed her goodbye as she headed out, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder and her smile bright and innocent. How many times had I told her to have fun, without realizing what she was really doing? The rage came next, boiling up from somewhere deep inside me. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms as I tried to keep it together. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed more. More proof. More answers. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as Sarah slept soundly beside me. Her breathing was slow and even, her face peaceful in the dim light. It made me sick to look at her, to think about how easily she lied to me, how effortlessly she carried on as if nothing was wrong. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to follow her. Friday arrived, and with it came a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. Sarah was getting ready for her yoga class, slipping into her workout leggings and tank top like it was just another routine night. I watched her from the living room, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Don't wait up," she said with a smile as she grabbed her mat and slung her gym bag over her shoulder. I forced a small smile back. "Have fun." The door closed behind her, and I waited exactly 2 minutes before grabbing my keys and following her. I kept my distance as I trailed her car through town. My palms were sweating against the steering wheel, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might drown out every other sound. She turned left onto a quieter street, far from the yoga studio she claimed to attend. Every time she slowed down, I held my breath, expecting her to notice me. But she didn't. She was too focused on where she was going. Or rather, who she was going to. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. My chest tightened as I parked a block away, out of sight but close enough to watch. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her gym bag on her shoulder. There was nothing hurried or nervous about her movements. She looked calm, like this was something she'd done countless times before. My stomach churned at the thought. As I watched, a second car pulled into the lot. My breath hitched as a man stepped out. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident stride. I didn't recognize him immediately, but there was something familiar about him. He walked over to Sarah, and they exchanged a few words before she smiled and reached for his hand. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The casual intimacy between them, the way she touched his arm, the way he leaned in. It was all so clear, so undeniable. They walked into the motel together, disappearing behind one of the doors. My hands were trembling as I sat there, staring at the spot where they just stood. I wanted to burst in, to confront them, to demand answers. But instead, I stayed where I was, paralyzed by the weight of what I'd just seen. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of our marriage, every time she looked me in the eyes and lied to me. The betrayal was like a knife twisting in my chest, sharp and relentless. When they finally emerged, I sank lower in my seat, watching as they walked back to their cars. They hugged briefly, her hands lingering on his back, before going their separate ways. I followed her home, keeping a safe distance. By the time she pulled into the driveway, I was ready to explode. Inside, she was all smiles, as if nothing had happened. She set her gym bag down by the door and stretched her arms over her head. "That class was so good," she said. "I feel amazing." I stared at her, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. She didn't notice, or maybe she just didn't care. "Glad to hear it," I said, my voice tight. She glanced at me, a flicker of something, nervousness, guilt, crossing her face. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack from the effort. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, brushing past me on her way to the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, my fists clenched, my thoughts racing. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had more. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her gym bag. My heart was pounding as I unzipped it, half expecting to find nothing. But inside, tucked beneath her neatly folded leggings and towel, was a bottle of cologne, clearly not hers, and a receipt from the motel. I stared at the receipt, the date and time confirming everything I already knew. My hands shook as I put it back in the bag, zipping it up just as I heard the water turn off. This was it, the proof I needed. I couldn't keep it in any longer. The weight of what I'd seen, what I knew, was suffocating me. Every moment I spent around Sarah felt like a lie, her words and actions dripping with the venom of betrayal. The receipt from the motel and the cologne in her bag were all I could think about. I needed to confront her, to tear down the facade she was so carefully maintaining. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered the room, her face calm and unsuspecting. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady. She frowned, setting her phone down. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling despite my effort to stay composed. "Where were you last night?" Her brow furrowed, and she tilted her head. "You know where I was. At yoga." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I followed you. I know where you went." Her face paled, and for a moment, she was silent. Then she laughed nervously, shaking her head. "Mark, what are you talking about? You followed me?" "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "To the motel. I saw you. I saw him. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about." Her breath hitched, and she stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. "Mark, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months? How you've been sneaking around behind my back while I sat at home with the kids, trusting you." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out to me, but I stepped back, my stomach churning at the thought of her touch. "Mark, please," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think. It's not." "Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I saw you, Sarah. I saw everything. The texts, the motel, the cologne in your bag. How long has this been going on? How many times have you lied to me? Walked out of this house pretending you were going to yoga while you were—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words felt like poison in my mouth. She broke down then, covering her face with her hands as sobs racked her body. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" I repeated, my voice bitter. "You're sorry now that you've been caught? Do you even realize what you've done? To me? To our family?" She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why did it?" I demanded. "Why, Sarah? Was I not enough for you? Was this some kind of game to you?" "No," she cried, shaking her head. "It wasn't a game. I don't know, Mark. I don't know why I did it. I was unhappy, I guess. Lonely. You're always at work, always busy, and I needed someone to pay attention to me." The words hit me like a slap in the face. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. You're saying I drove you to this? No, she said quickly. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to explain. Don't bother, I said, cutting her off. There's nothing you can say that will make this okay. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging heavy between us. She sat there, crying quietly, while I stood frozen, my mind racing. I thought about our kids upstairs, asleep and unaware of the storm brewing beneath their feet. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the life we'd built, and how it was all crumbling in an instant. I want you out, I said finally, my voice cold and unyielding. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. What? You heard me, I said. I want you out of this house. Tonight. Mark, please, she begged. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. It's too late for that, I said, shaking my head. You made your choice, Sarah. Now you have to live with it. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I needed air, space, anything to get away from her and the mess she'd created. As I stood outside, the cool night air stinging my face, I felt a strange mix of emotions, rage, heartbreak, and a faint, bitter sense of relief. The illusion was gone. The lies were exposed. And now, I could finally see things for what they really were. Sarah didn't leave that night. I knew she wouldn't, no matter how much I demanded it. She locked herself in our bedroom, leaving me to sleep on the couch, or at least try to. The house felt unbearably quiet, every tick of the clock dragging out the silence like a mocking reminder of how everything had unraveled. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the kids' laughter in the kitchen. I stayed where I was, staring at the ceiling, trying to summon the energy to face the day. When I finally forced myself up, Sarah was already at the table, pouring cereal for the kids as though nothing had happened. Her hair was neatly brushed, her makeup light but flawless. To anyone else, she looked like a picture-perfect mom starting her day. But I couldn't unsee the person she'd revealed herself to be the night before. "Morning," she said softly when she saw me, her voice tentative. I ignored her, ruffling my son's hair as I reached for a mug to pour myself coffee. "Daddy, can we go to the park today?" my daughter asked, her big eyes wide with hope. "Maybe," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll see how the day goes." I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, her unspoken words hanging in the air. I knew she wanted to talk, to plead her case, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. After breakfast, I packed up the kids and took them to the park anyway. I needed space, a moment to breathe without her presence suffocating me. I sat on the bench, watching the kids play, my mind racing through 1,000 thoughts. How had it come to this? How had I been so blind? The anger bubbled up again, and I clenched my fists, trying to push it down. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about them. The kids. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. When we got home, Sarah was waiting in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I sent the kids upstairs to play, bracing myself for what I knew was coming. "Mark," she started, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I sat down across from her, my arms crossed. "What is there to talk about, Sarah? You did this. You destroyed everything." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held my gaze. I know I messed up. But please, Mark, you have to understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I demanded. "Why, Sarah? If you were unhappy, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me instead of sneaking around behind my back?" She took a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "I don't know. I was scared, I guess. Scared that if I told you how I felt, you'd hate me, that you'd think I wasn't good enough." I laughed bitterly. "And lying to me, sleeping with someone else, that was better?" "No," she whispered. "It wasn't. It was wrong. I know that. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I felt invisible, Mark. Like I didn't matter anymore. Like I was just here, existing, but not living." Her words stung, but I didn't let them soften me. "You think I don't feel the same way sometimes? You think I don't miss how we used to be? But I didn't go out and find someone else to fix it." She looked away, her shoulders slumping. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said softly, "but I need you to know that I love you, Mark. I love our family, and I want to fix this, if you'll let me." I stared at her, my chest tight with a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Love, anger, betrayal. They all swirled together, leaving me unable to think clearly. "I don't know if that's possible," I said finally, my voice hollow. Her tears fell freely now, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, as though she knew the damage was too deep to repair. That night, I found myself back on the couch, staring at the dark ceiling. My mind was a mess, torn between the life we'd built and the lies she'd told. I didn't know what to do, didn't know if there was any way forward. But one thing was clear: things would never be the same. The days following our conversation felt like walking on eggshells. Sarah tried her best to maintain a semblance of normalcy, throwing herself into taking care of the kids and the house, but I could see the strain on her face. Every time we were in the same room, the tension was unbearable. It was like we were trapped in a bubble that could burst at any moment. I knew I couldn't stay in that bubble much longer. Every time I looked at her, I felt the weight of her betrayal all over again. Her words echoed in my mind. "I felt invisible. I didn't want to hurt you." But they didn't make the pain any less sharp. I spent most of my time thinking about the kids. They were the only thing keeping me from walking out the door without a word. They didn't deserve to lose the stability they'd known their whole lives because of Sarah's choices. But I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. That Thursday evening, while Sarah was putting the kids to bed, I sat in the kitchen with my laptop, drafting an email to my lawyer. I needed to figure out the best way to separate without tearing our family apart completely. The divorce was inevitable, but the logistics were a nightmare. When Sarah came downstairs, she saw the laptop open and paused in the doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked cautiously. I didn't look up. "Sorting things out," I said flatly. She walked closer, her footsteps hesitant. "Mark, can we talk?" I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at her. "What's there left to say?" She pulled out a chair across from me and sat down, folding her hands on the table. "I know I hurt you," she said softly. "I know I betrayed your trust in the worst way possible. But I'm asking you, begging you, not to give up on us. Please, Mark. For the kids, if not for me." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think staying together for the kids is the answer? You think they won't notice the tension, the resentment? Kids aren't stupid, Sarah. They'll know something's wrong." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "You destroyed what we had. You made a choice, over and over again, to put someone else before your family. And now you want me to pretend like everything's fine? I can't do that. I won't." She reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to take mine. I pulled away, the distance between us feeling insurmountable. "Mark, please," she whispered. "I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut him out of my life completely, whatever it takes." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice cold. "You already made your choice, Sarah, and now I'm making mine." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, her sobs shaking her shoulders. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly swallowed by the anger that still simmered beneath the surface. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I continued. "We'll figure out custody arrangements and how to split everything. But it's over." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "What about the kids? How are we supposed to explain this to them?" "We'll tell them the truth," I said. "That we're better off apart. That it's what's best for all of us." "They're going to hate me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They deserve to know who you really are," I said, my words sharp enough to cut. "And maybe you should think about why you're so afraid of that." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah wiped her tears, standing up from the table and walking out of the kitchen without another word. I sat there, staring at the empty chair she'd left behind, the weight of the conversation settling over me like a heavy fog. That night, I started packing a bag. I couldn't stay in the house any longer, not with her under the same roof. I'd arranged to stay with a friend for a while, someone who'd been through a divorce of his own and understood what I was going through. When the morning came, I told Sarah I'd be leaving for a while. She didn't argue, didn't try to stop me. She just nodded, her expression hollow. The kids didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home that night. I told them I had to work on something important, that I'd be back soon. But as I drove away from the house, their confused faces burned into my mind. I wondered if I'd ever really be back. The first night away from the house felt strange. I was staying in my friend Matt's guest room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and the faint smell of old laundry detergent. It wasn't home, but at least I didn't have to face Sarah. Still, the silence was deafening. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the kids, the life I was walking away from, and the mess Sarah had made of everything. Matt had been through a divorce of his own a few years back. When I told him I needed a place to crash, he didn't even hesitate. "Stay as long as you need," he'd said, slapping me on the back. "Divorce is hell, but you'll come out stronger on the other side. Trust me." I wasn't so sure. Strong wasn't exactly how I felt. Angry? Yes. Betrayed? Absolutely. But strong? That felt like a distant dream. The next few days were a blur of meetings with my lawyer and phone calls with Sarah. We were civil, barely, but the tension in every conversation was impossible to ignore. The biggest point of contention, of course, was the kids. "I'm not going to let you take them from me," Sarah said during one of our calls, her voice sharp and defensive. "I'm not trying to take them from you," I said, my jaw tight. "But I want full custody, and I think we both know why that's best." "Best for who?" she snapped. "You think uprooting their entire lives is what's best for them? You're angry, Mark, and you're using the kids to punish me." "This isn't about punishing you," I said, my voice low. "It's about protecting them. Do you really think I trust you after everything that's happened? Do you think I'm going to let George, or anyone like him, near them?" Her silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. My lawyer had advised me to stay calm, to focus on the facts and not let emotions take over. But that was easier said than done. Every time I thought about the kids being in the same house as Sarah, the same house George had walked into countless times, my blood boiled. When we finally met with the mediator to discuss custody, the tension in the room was suffocating. Sarah sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes darting toward me every few seconds. I avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the mediator, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor and a voice that sounded like she'd seen it all before. "The goal here is to come to an arrangement that's in the best interest of the children," the mediator began. "Both of you are clearly capable parents, so this process is about finding a balance that works for everyone involved." I wanted to laugh at the idea that Sarah was a capable parent, but I bit my tongue. This wasn't the place for anger. "I'd like full custody," I said plainly. "I think it's the best option for the kids to have a stable, consistent environment." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Full custody? Are you serious, Mark? You're going to cut me out of their lives?" "No one's cutting you out," I said, my voice firm but measured. "You'll still see them. But they need stability, Sarah. And frankly, I don't trust you to provide that right now." Her face flushed with anger, but the mediator stepped in before she could respond. "Mark, can you explain why you believe full custody is the best option?" I took a deep breath, my hands clenched into fists under the table. "Because their mother has been lying to them, and to me, for months. She's brought dangerous people into their lives, and she's shown a complete lack of judgment. I can't risk that continuing." Sarah's voice broke as she tried to respond. "I've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad mother. I love my kids, Mark. I'd do anything for them. Anything except be honest." I shot back, unable to stop myself. The mediator raised a hand, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "Let's focus on solutions, not accusations. Sarah, do you have any concerns about Mark's ability to parent effectively?" Sarah hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "No," she admitted quietly. "He's a good dad. I've never doubted that." "Then perhaps we can work toward a shared custody arrangement," the mediator suggested. "Mark, would you be open to that?" I hesitated, the thought of sharing custody making my stomach churn. But as much as I hated Sarah for what she'd done, I couldn't deny that she loved our kids. And as much as I wanted to shut her out completely, I knew that wouldn't be fair to them. "Fine," I said finally, my voice tight. But there need to be boundaries. Strict ones. The mediator nodded, jotting down notes. We can work on the specifics of that arrangement. The most important thing is ensuring the kids feel supported and secure during this transition. After the meeting, I walked out feeling drained, like I'd just run a marathon with no finish line in sight. Sarah caught up with me in the parking lot, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Mark," she said softly, "thank you for being willing to share custody." I turned to face her, my expression hard. "Don't thank me. This isn't about you. It's about them. And you'd better not give me a single reason to regret this decision." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't stick around to see if she had more to say. I got in my car and drove away, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like there was a path forward. A messy, painful path, but a path nonetheless. The finality of the mediation settled over me like a heavy weight. The custody agreement was clear. The kids would spend weekdays with me and weekends with Sarah. There would be no unannounced visits, no lingering contact unless it pertained directly to the children. It was the cleanest break I could manage while still keeping their well-being at the forefront. When the agreement was signed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The life I had spent years building with Sarah had officially come to an end, reduced to a legal document dictating who got what and when. But there was also a sense of freedom, a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild something better for myself and the kids. The first weekend without the kids was the hardest. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Every corner of it seemed to echo with memories of what used to be: family movie nights on the couch, Saturday morning pancake breakfasts, the sound of the kids' laughter as they ran through the halls. I tried to keep busy, cleaning, organizing, anything to fill the void. But no matter how much I tried, the silence was deafening. It didn't help that Sarah called every night the kids were with me, her voice soft and hesitant as she asked how they were doing. I kept my answers short, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of hearing anything more than the basics. "They're fine," I'd say, my tone clipped. "They had dinner, did their homework, and went to bed. I miss them," she said one night, her voice breaking. I wanted to say, "And whose fault is that?" but I bit my tongue. Instead, I ended the call as quickly as I could, the knot in my chest tightening with every word. Time passed slowly, but it passed. The kids adjusted to the new routine quicker than I expected, their resilience both comforting and heartbreaking. They asked about Sarah often, and I did my best to answer their questions honestly without poisoning their perception of her. "Why doesn't Mommy live here anymore?" my daughter asked one night as I tucked her into bed. I paused, searching for the right words. "Mommy and Daddy had some problems, sweetie," I said gently. "But we both love you very much, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure you're happy." She nodded, her big eyes searching mine. "Will we still see her?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll see her every weekend, and she'll always be your mommy, no matter what." She seemed satisfied with that, curling up under the covers with her favorite stuffed animal. But as I turned off the light and closed the door, I couldn't shake the guilt that clung to me like a shadow. One evening, a few weeks after the mediation, I got a call from Matt. "You need to get out of the house," he said bluntly. "I'm fine," I lied, staring at the pile of laundry I'd been meaning to fold for days. "No, you're not," he said. "Come on, man. Let's grab a drink. Just one. You don't even have to stay long." I hesitated, the thought of going out feeling foreign and exhausting. But eventually, I agreed. At the bar, Matt ordered us both a beer and clapped me on the back. "You're doing better than I did," he said with a grin. "After my divorce, I spent 6 months crying into my cereal every morning." I laughed, the sound surprising me. "Don't give me too much credit," I said. "I'm barely holding it together." "Hey, that's normal," he said. "But you've got to start thinking about what's next. You can't stay stuck in this forever." "What's next?" I repeated, shaking my head. "I have no idea." "Well, start small," he said. "Focus on yourself for a change. You've been putting everyone else first for years. Maybe it's time to figure out what you want." His words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes. I signed up for a gym membership, started cooking meals that weren't just for the kids, and even picked up an old hobby, woodworking, that I hadn't touched in years. Bit by bit, I began to feel like myself again. The anger and sadness didn't disappear overnight, but they started to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to build something new. As for Sarah, our interactions remained civil but distant. She seemed to be struggling in her own way, though I didn't ask for details. I'd made my peace with the fact that she was no longer my responsibility. My focus was on the kids, on creating a stable, loving home for them, and on finding a path forward for myself. One evening, as I sat in the garage working on a new project, a bookshelf for the kids' room, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in months. The past still lingered, its scars still tender, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it was holding me back. The kids burst into the garage, their laughter filling the space as they ran to show me the drawings they'd made. I smiled, setting down my tools and pulling them into a hug. In that moment, I realized something important. Life didn't have to be perfect to be good. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was moving forward, one step at a time.